The night the glass shattered, everyone heard it, but no one moved. It wasn't just the sound. It was what the sound meant. In a place like this, nothing ever broke. The restaurant glowed under soft amber light, each table carefully spaced like islands of privacy. Crystal glasses reflected candle flames, silverware gleamed untouched, and the low murmur of quiet conversations blended into something almost rehearsed. People didn't come here just to eat. They came to be seen, to exist inside a curated world where imperfections were quietly erased before they could be noticed. So when the sharp crack of shattering crystal rang out across the room, it didn't belong. It sliced through the atmosphere, loud and sudden, like a mistake no one knew how to correct. At the center of it stood Adrian Cole. His fingers were still slightly curled, as if the glass hadn't fully left his hand yet. Tiny shards scattered across the polished marble floor, catching the light like fragments of something more fragile than glass. A thin line of red began to form across his palm, but he didn't seem to notice. His chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath a little too fast, a little too sharp. His tie hung loose around his collar, the top buttons of his shirt undone, as though he had been trying, and failing, to breathe easier for some time now. "Is this a joke?" he said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. No one answered. The waiter who had been standing nearby froze mid-step, his tray hovering awkwardly in the air. A couple at the adjacent table stared down at their plates, suddenly fascinated by their untouched food. Somewhere in the distance, a fork clinked softly against porcelain, then quickly stopped. "Because I'm not laughing," Adrian added, louder now. The manager appeared almost instantly, as if conjured by the tension itself. He approached with a careful smile, the kind practiced over years of dealing with difficult clients. "Sir, I sincerely apologize," he began, his tone smooth but urgent. "We'll replace that immediately. If there's anything, replace it." Adrian let out a sharp, humorless laugh. His eyes flicked down to the broken glass, then back up again, something dark flashing across his face. Before anyone could react, he reached for another glass from the table. The movement was deliberate, slow enough to stop him, fast enough that no one did. He held it for just a moment, staring at it as though weighing something invisible. Then he let it fall. The second crash echoed even louder than the first. A woman gasped quietly. Someone pushed their chair back, the legs scraping against the floor in a small, panicked retreat. The illusion of calm was beginning to crack, spreading outward from Adrian like a ripple. "You think this is about a glass?" he said, his voice rising, each word edged with something dangerously close to breaking. "You think you can just fix it and everything goes back to normal?" The manager's composure faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered. "Sir, please, we don't want to cause a disturbance." "A disturbance?" Adrian stepped forward, his shoes crunching softly over the shattered pieces beneath him. "That's all this is to you? A disturbance?" His hand trembled slightly, whether from the cut or something deeper, it was hard to tell. Around the room, conversations had completely died. Every eye was on him now, even the ones pretending otherwise. Adrian's gaze swept across them, well-dressed strangers with composed faces and carefully controlled reactions. People who had never had to raise their voices to be heard. People who didn't break things in public. Something in his expression shifted. "Of course," he muttered, almost to himself. "Everyone just sits there, watches." The manager subtly gestured toward the entrance. Two security staff members began to move closer, their approach cautious but purposeful. Adrian noticed. His jaw tightened. "Go ahead," he said, spreading his arms slightly. "Throw me out. That's what you do, right? Clean up the mess and pretend it never happened." No one responded, because in a way, he wasn't wrong. The restaurant was built on that very principle. But before the situation could tip any further, before security could step in or Adrian could escalate again, a quiet voice slipped into the space between them. "Sir, are you hurt?" It wasn't loud, it didn't carry authority or urgency. And yet, it changed everything. Adrian blinked, the words cutting through the noise in his head more effectively than shouting ever could. He turned slightly. The waitress stood a few steps away, her posture calm, her expression steady. She didn't rush forward, didn't hover, didn't look at him like a problem to be solved. She just stood there, present. "Do I look hurt?" Adrian shot back automatically, though the force behind his words had weakened. She didn't react to the tone. Instead, she stepped closer, carefully navigating the scattered glass. In her hand, she held a neatly folded napkin. "You're bleeding," she said simply. Adrian frowned, glancing down. For the first time, he noticed the cut. A thin stream of red had traced its way across his palm, small but unmistakable. "It's nothing," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "May I?" she asked. The question hung there, unexpected. No one had asked him anything all night. They had apologized, explained, managed, but not asked. Adrian hesitated. There was a moment where it seemed like he might refuse, like he might pull his hand back and rebuild the anger he had been clinging to. But something in her expression made that difficult. She wasn't impressed by him. Wasn't intimidated. Wasn't even particularly interested in who he was. She just saw him. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he extended his hand. The shift in the room was immediate. Tension loosened, just slightly, like a knot beginning to unravel. She took his hand gently, wrapping the napkin around the cut with careful precision. Her movements were steady, unhurried, as though there were no audience watching, no broken glass at their feet, no disruption to recover from. Just a small injury that needed tending. Adrian watched her, confusion flickering beneath the remnants of his anger. "Why aren't you scared?" he asked quietly. It wasn't a challenge this time. It was a genuine question. She glanced up at him, her eyes meeting his without hesitation. "Because you don't look dangerous," she said. Adrian let out a short breath, something between a laugh and disbelief. "I just destroyed your restaurant." Her gaze dropped briefly to the scattered shards, then back to him. "No," she said calmly. "You broke a few glasses." The simplicity of it landed harder than any reprimand could have. For a moment, Adrian just stood there. The noise in his head, the anger, the frustration, the weight of everything he hadn't said or been heard about, all of it seemed to lose its grip, if only slightly. Around them, the restaurant remained silent, waiting. But Adrian no longer seemed like the center of a storm. Just a man standing in the middle of broken glass, with a bandaged hand and nowhere left to direct his anger. And for the first time that night, he didn't try. The restaurant never fully recovered its earlier rhythm that night, even though every visible sign of disruption had been erased. The broken glass was gone. The tables were reset with mathematical precision. New guests had been seated in carefully selected corners, far from where anything had happened. Soft music resumed, low and controlled, as if someone had turned the volume of reality down just enough to make people comfortable again. But something invisible lingered in the air, something that couldn't be swept away with a brush. Adrian Cole sat alone at his table, no longer the center of attention, yet not entirely forgotten either. A few glances still drifted his way, subtle and fleeting, quickly disguised behind sips of wine or polite conversation. No one approached him. No one challenged him. For once, no one tried to impress him either. His hand rested on the table, the neatly wrapped napkin now faintly stained beneath the careful folds. The cut had stopped bleeding, but he found himself staring at it anyway, as though it represented something more than a small injury. Something quieter. Something honest. The chair across from him remained empty. For several minutes, he didn't move. The earlier storm inside him had burned through its intensity, leaving behind a strange, hollow calm. Not peace exactly, but not chaos either. Just space. His gaze drifted across the room, taking in details he hadn't noticed before. The way the waiters moved with silent coordination. The faint crease of concentration on a young chef's face visible through the open kitchen. The soft glow of candles reflected in untouched glasses. Everything seemed deliberate, everything except what had just happened. Then he saw her again. The waitress moved between tables with the same steady composure, carrying plates, refilling glasses, offering quiet smiles that didn't linger longer than necessary. She wasn't avoiding him, but she wasn't drawn to him either. She simply continued, as if his outburst had not defined the night. That unsettled him more than anger would have. A few minutes later, she approached his table again, her steps unhurried, her expression unchanged. In her hands, she carried a small tray, nothing extravagant, nothing designed to impress. Just a simple dessert and a glass of water. She placed them in front of him with quiet precision. "I didn't order this," Adrian said, though his tone lacked the sharpness it had carried before. "I know," she replied. He glanced at the dessert. It wasn't plated like the others he had seen that evening. There were no artistic flourishes, no dramatic presentation. It looked real. "Then why bring it?" he asked. She met his gaze calmly. "Because you didn't eat." He leaned back slightly, studying her more carefully now. "Do you always do this?" he asked. "Take care of people who ruin your night?" Her expression didn't change. "Sometimes people don't need punishment." The answer lingered between them. Adrian exhaled slowly, running his fingers lightly along the edge of the table. You think that's what this was? He asked. Me needing kindness. I think, she said after a brief pause, you were already having a worse night than anyone else here. The words landed without force, but they didn't need it. Adrian's jaw tightened, not in anger this time, but in something closer to recognition. He looked away for a moment, his eyes settling somewhere beyond the restaurant walls, as if replaying something only he could see. You don't know anything about me, he said finally. Maybe not, she admitted. But I know what it looks like when someone's angry at something that isn't in the room. Silence followed, not uncomfortable, just honest. Adrian's gaze dropped to the dessert again. For a moment, he didn't touch it. Then, almost absently, he picked up the spoon. The first bite surprised him. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it wasn't. It was simple, warm, familiar in a way he couldn't quite place. He paused, the spoon still in his hand. It's good, he said. She gave a small nod. It's simple. He let out a quiet breath, something close to a laugh but softer. Yeah, I think that's why. Another pause. This time, it felt lighter. She shifted slightly, then did something no one else in the restaurant had done that night. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. Not as a server, as a person. That must have hurt, she said. Adrian looked at her, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Whatever brought you here instead of where you were supposed to be? He held her gaze for a moment, then looked away again. My father signed a deal tonight, he said after a while. 600 million, she nodded, not impressed, not dismissive. Just listening. I was supposed to be there, he continued. Celebrate, smile, pretend it all matters the same way it does to him. But you came here instead. He nodded. Why? The question was simple, but it lingered heavier than expected. Adrian's fingers tightened slightly around the spoon before he set it down. Because he didn't notice I wasn't there, he said. There was no anger in his voice now. Just truth. She didn't respond immediately. She didn't try to fill the silence or soften the statement. She just sat there, letting it exist. That must have hurt, she repeated gently. Adrian let out a slow breath, his shoulders dropping in a way they hadn't all night. Yeah, he admitted. The word felt different, lighter, somehow. He picked up the spoon again, taking another bite of the dessert. This time, he didn't analyze it. He just tasted it. Around them, the restaurant continued its quiet choreography. Orders were taken, plates delivered, glasses refilled. The illusion had been restored for everyone else. But here, at this table, something real had taken its place. After a while, Adrian pushed the plate slightly away, not because he didn't like it, but because he didn't need more. He reached into his jacket, pulling out his wallet. She noticed immediately. It's already taken care of, she said. He frowned. By who? She met his gaze, a faint hint of something softer in her expression now. Consider it, kindness. Adrian hesitated. For a man used to transactions, to everything having a price, the idea didn't sit easily at first. But then he closed his wallet slowly. Thank you, he said. This time, there was no hesitation. No edge, just sincerity. She nodded once, then stood, returning the chair to its place with the same quiet precision she had shown all night. No dramatic exit, no lingering moment, just a continuation. Adrian remained seated for a few seconds longer, looking at the empty chair across from him. Then he stood. As he walked toward the exit, no one stopped him. No one stared openly anymore. The moment had passed for them. But for him, it hadn't. The night air outside felt different as it hit his face, cooler, quieter, more real than the carefully controlled atmosphere he had just left behind. He paused for a moment on the sidewalk, glancing back through the large glass windows. Inside, everything looked perfect again. Untouched, as if nothing had happened. But he knew better. Somewhere inside, a waitress who hadn't cared who he was had seen something no one else had bothered to look for. And for the first time in a long time, Adrian didn't feel like proving anything. He just walked away, the weight he had carried earlier no longer pressing quite as hard. Not gone, but lighter, and sometimes, that was enough.